Between her lifelong interest in spirituality and metaphysics and her work in broadcasting and digital media, she joined Hay House Publishing, working for Louise Hay, and was the network manager and producer of Hay House Radio. Diane has so many incredible experiences working with and interviewing legendary new thought and spiritual leaders, including Deepak Chopra, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Carolyn Miss, Gregg Braden, and many others.
Welcome to Awakening Soul Divinity, your sacred space for deep healing and transformation. Listen to inspiring conversations with healing experts, spiritual guides, and teachers as we explore ancient wisdom, modern healing, and powerful stories of change. I'll also share practical insights from my personal journey, from spiritual crisis to inner purpose. Whether you're seeking to overcome anxiety, embrace your true nature, or awaken your higher self, this podcast offers guidance to help you transform your life and elevate collective consciousness.
Ooh, welcome, Diane.
Well, thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was so excited about this because let me tell you something. For you to join me on this journey is so important because you are my direct connection to Hay House and Louise Hay. And that's where my journey basically started. So I'm sure you've heard this from a gajillion people before, maybe, I don't know, but that's why this means a lot to me. And we'll get into it a little bit later. There's some more, but the information that Diane's going to be sharing has to do with my podcast. So it's going to be, thank you. Just thank you for being here. I'm just excited that you decided to join me on this.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to, share any stories or experiences
Okay.
that I've had along the way. And
Yeah.
I love hearing people's stories. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to share.
Awesome. Awesome. And that's also the point of this podcast. So let's get started. So here's the story sharing part. Can you briefly share a trauma, a challenging experience, or a catalyst that led you to the path that you're on today?
Wow, that's because then you're going back and thinking, well, what's happened? I think I've always had an interest in spirituality and metaphysical, paranormal. I mean, I think I might have been the girl at the slumber party with the Ouija board kind of thing, and we'd freak ourselves out. But I mean, I was always interested in you know things that couldn't be explained. And growing up, uh, I was brought up Catholic, and so we went to church every Sunday with my father, and we had to go to CCD class and things like that. So I went through all the
Mm-hmm.
rituals, and I mean, luckily, I didn't have any horrible experience. That some people unfortunately have had, with Catholicism, but I kind of like the ritual and the candles and the stained glass and like all of the pomp and circumstance that went along with it. I kind of daydream like when I'm in church looking around, like reading the Stations of the Cross and that kind of thing. But I would ask questions, in CCD, like who is Mary Magdalene and was that Jesus' girlfriend and what was that about? And sometimes depending, you get, the raised eyebrow or like they laugh or something like that. But I was always interested, always wondering, what it was. So I think it was just kind of a slow burn, I guess, more
Oh.
than like a rug pulled out under you moment that some people have,
Mm-hmm.
or like a rock bottom moment or something like that. I think I was always just kind of questioning and wondering what it's all about, why are we here?
Right. Right.
Those big questions. And
Yeah.
I'm still wondering, and I think that it's kind of a lifelong pursuit. And when you think you know something, then something else will happen and you don't. So I think there's always something to learn. So there was
Yeah.
always that interest. And I was always interested in music and broadcasting, and kind of went along that route in radio. And
Mhm.
then it kind of took a twist when I got here to San Diego. And like radio is, I got fired like a lot of people from a radio job. So I was working part-time at PBS and wondering what my next step would be. And maybe this is the catalyst. is that I was looking on Monster, monster.com to find a job.
Yeah.
And I saw an ad that said radio producer Hay House. And I knew who Louise Hay was, and I had the books on the shelf. I'm like, okay, something hit me like this is something I need to pay attention to.
What
So
year
that
was this? I don't mean to interrupt, but what year was this?
this was early 2000s, like probably 2005 is when I
Okay.
started there.
Okay.
So, podcasting wasn't really a thing yet. Online broadcasting was kind of, bubbling like in its infancy, but I wanted to see what this is about. So that became like, emails and resumes and stuff, kind of what's the word? Hassle or pestering of the HR director there, whose,
Yeah, right.
whose
Well,
name was
for a
Phyllis,
company like that, I can see what you're saying.
who
Yeah.
was a wonderful person,
Yeah.
but I'm sure she's like, oh, this person again. But then I finally, I felt this is something that I need to see what this is about.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of divine timing that they were at the time, Hay House was launching an online radio network to promote their authors, their books, their events. And that was kind of a new thing. Like Reed Tracy, the president of Hay House, was taking a chance on this new kind of thing. And I
Hmm.
remember my old friends in, traditional radio, terrestrial radio, they were like, what are you
Terrestrial. Is
doing?
that what you call the
That's the
terrestrial
word. Yeah,
radio?
it's called terrestrial radio.
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay.
my old friends in rock radio were asking me, no one's going to listen to radio online. What are you crazy? And I said, no, I think they will. So it was kind of interesting to be at that kind of crest of the wave where things were really shifting. Traditional radio was
Mhm.
going through all kinds of changes, morphing, companies were buying and selling, things were really in transition.
Yeah.
So I saw this could be something. And when I went and I met with Summer McStravick, who was running the online radio network, and we were talking, I'm like, this is like this could be really amazing. And
Hmm.
it became like my dream radio job because I could combine the things that I really loved, which was, being on air and doing all that, but then to still explore all those other questions that I had had for years,
Well,
growing up.
what better place to be able to do something like that than Hay
Yeah.
House? I mean, come on,
And at the time it was really an incredible uh, place for teachers. I mean, Louise was still involved.
Mhm.
Dr. Wayne Dyer was there, Doreen Virtue, Carolyn Mace, John Holland, James von Prague, just like a list of all these amazing teachers, Gregg Braden. And then there was always, new authors that they were bringing in. So you really had a chance to absorb just all of this incredible information.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
And I think,
that's what I did.
yeah, I mean, that's just, oh my gosh. Well, I get excited. I feel like I'm a big fan right now. Oh my God. Yeah. So what's why it's like that for me is because I actually got my bachelor's degree in mass communication. So I did radio and television, and I had my experiences way back when, I don't know, 1986, when they were still using those the cart
Oh yeah,
machines
the carts.
to do
Uh-huh.
the commercials and all that kind of stuff. And we had what are those things called?
Those black discs with the
Yeah,
hole
those
in the
big
middle.
black discs. Yeah, we had all that stuff, and it was like everything. And that's just the radio part. Like, my experience was also, because it was in television, we were also, or and film, we were editing. So we're not doing editing all, in one place on the computer. We're cutting, things, everything's being done, splicing and all this stuff. So I remember that time. So I think that's why I get so excited when you share that, because it was such a different time than it is now. And, having a degree in mass communication and technically never doing anything with it, well, here we are, we're doing something, right? So
Yeah.
but linking it back to, your experience with Hay House, a lot of people get excited because Hay House has changed many lives, and that's the other part of the excitement I have with being able to work with you. We'll share that in a minute too. Is that, that's what's going on here. It's basically like you guys were one of the beginning, uh, people or group or whatever company that started this mental health healing journey for many, many, many people. So that's something that's admirable, Diane. I mean, I'd love to say thank you on behalf of all y'all who did this, because I think if it wasn't for that, then we wouldn't be where we are today with the things that we have to help people as best as we
Well,
can.
Louise was really an amazing person and visionary, although I don't think she really thought of herself in that way. I think it was kind of
Yeah.
a natural progression for her, and she was exploring for herself. And her story continues to inspire me today, because when I'm, having a day that, what am I even doing? I should throw in the towel, who said starting a network would be a great idea? And then I think of Louise, and people would ask her, how did you start a company, in your 60s at a time when women were being shuffled off to the old folks home at that point? I mean, really at 40, you were probably way over the hill. At
Right.
60, forget it. You weren't
Yeah.
going to do
Yeah.
anything new then.
Yeah.
So she really proved all of those people wrong, and inspired a lot of people, and especially women that, no,
Yeah.
we're still vibrant and able to contribute and to do new things, and you can teach old dogs new tricks, all of those cliches. So she was really inspirational to me in that way, to see someone that was doing it, and just a lot of the care that she took in the 80s, working with people with AIDS, with the hay rides, back in LA, when she was just still kind of a science of mind minister and teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But people didn't want to touch any of those people then. If you're old enough to remember kind of the fear and ignorance and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
grief and hatred and all of that was happening at that time. And she opened her home to these men, many people who had been thrown out of their house, turned away by their family, all of that. And she just simply offered them love. She's like, we're not going to do ain't it awful, she would say. We're going to say, I love myself, and doing like the mirror work, which some people can think is silly. But yeah, hey, try it. That's all I can
Right.
say.
It's
Look,
scary at first, but it
it
works.
is. See if you can look yourself in the eye and
Yeah.
say, I love you and I think
Yeah.
you're great, without an eye roll or something like that. But she kind of forced people to look in that mirror and look at themselves in a different way. And instead of all of the self-criticism, say, I love myself, you're
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah.
a lot of that, and I just hope that going forward, in the future generations, that people can still look back at her work and what she's taught, because I think it's still important today.
Mm-hmm.
Still need it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because when you were talking about that, you reminded me of this video that she had done 2 years before she died. I think she was like 91 or something when she did the video, and this like blasted my life into a whole different. And it was so simple. So she said something that was simple and powerful, and what it was she's like, I'm 91 years old and I still step in shit. But
Mm-hmm.
the good news is that the more you heal and the older you, now I'm paraphrasing, the more you heal and the older you get, you don't stay in it. You step out quicker. And when she said that, I was like, okay. And it's true. It really is. I mean, when you start to recognize the truth of who you are and uncover that truth and start to step into your power, she was a powerful woman. I mean, I think she still got things working up in there, for us, helping us out in some
I
ways.
hope, I
Yeah,
believe that. I hope
yeah,
so.
yeah. But it's really it's great to have someone to talk to who's been with it, pretty much for a long time. I wouldn't say the entire time, because I think the where she started was more in the 80s when the AIDS
Oh
stuff
yeah,
too,
yeah.
right? Yeah. But
And she went through a lot of ups and downs. I mean, the company had, successes and failures. There was a time when they had to fire a bunch of staff and kind of start over and,
wow.
rebuild things. And even at a point when I was there was like a big changeover of staff. So a lot of people were let go. And so, and even through all those ups and downs of the company, she still kind of stayed the course, kept things going.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that happens with every company, I think, with
sure.
everybody.
Oh, of course. Growing pains. Yeah. And
Yeah.
for somebody like her, the visionary that she was, the person that she was, it created a space for that process to happen without it exploding. The fact that, or going away or whatever. It was just and that's how life works. That's how healing works. That's how we got through. We tend to crash into something and then we build ourselves back out of it, and we'll do it again, and whatever. Those of us who have been through the chosen trauma lifestyle. I keep
Yeah.
thinking, I was like, I picked this so I could understand what's going on. So yeah, so I think that's wonderful. And you had mentioned that you're in the business still, and the name of the company that Diane and her partner Tina started is mindbodyspirit.fm. And I still don't know how we got connected, and that's irrelevant at this point. But what made you decide to start mindbodyspirit.fm, and what would you like our audience to know about it?
Well, it's a labor of love, a growing endeavor. And I think what was the catalyst for that was just, me coming in contact with the right person and meeting my business partner, Tina Williamson, and both of us kind of seeing that this could be something. Like, we were both working for the Unity organization at the time on their online radio network. And Unity was such a breath of fresh air for me. I was not really familiar with their philosophy or the movement. Like, I had heard of Science of Mind, but I wasn't sure. Like, I thought, is Unity Unitarians? So there was some confusion.
Yeah.
But learning a lot about their philosophy is just inclusion and love,
Mm-hmm.
and not a lot of scary dogma. And kind of if you could say, their tagline would be like spiritual but not religious. Although
Mm-hmm.
they were based in Christianity,
Yeah.
it wasn't like, I'm not a horrible person. I'm not a sinner. Like a lot of the things that traditional religious, traditions will tell you, that, you need to be saved. You're a horrible, you're a sinner, you're bad,
Sure.
and those things can really sink in deep, and you're holding on to it unconsciously. You may not even realize that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bad person, that conditioning. So it was just really interesting and refreshing to hear a different message, and just a wonderful people. So I worked with them for a few years after I left Hay House in 2017, and that's where I met Tina. So we both kind of had our heads together, like, I think this could be an interesting thing. Podcasting's really taking off. We think that we can gather together a community. So it was really like a way of curating teachers that we both thought had important messages, and that we felt that they needed a home. And then also at that time, Hay House Radio, that had operated. I mean, at the height of Hay House Radio, we had, I think, 30, 31 like live radio shows all going, during the week. And God, how many people did that? I think we had like 2 million visitors to the website a year. So we had some great success with that. But then, technology was changing, things were changing, and the company decided to just, stop doing the live broadcast and like move everything over to an app. So at that time, there were a lot of teachers that still wanted to do a radio show, still wanted to present their message that way. So
Mm-hmm.
we moved over some Hay House authors that wanted to be on Unity. And then at the time, Unity pulled the plug kind of after COVID. They needed a home. So basically we were there. We're like, yeah, okay. We're building this. We'll be your home. We'll be the community. And we've tried to continue to build on that. Like, we started with one person and now there's 70. So sometimes when you're in the middle of it, I remember a therapist I saw one time, and I was telling her all these things that were going on. I'm like, you know, why am I feeling anxiety? She's like, did you hear what you just told me? Like, I guess like when you're in the middle of it, you don't really realize it. But now, like that I'm telling you, I can look back, I can on the past, couple of years and say, wow, that's really is pretty amazing that we've been able to build this to 70, soon to be probably like 75 by the end of the summer with the other shows that we have coming on. So it's been an interesting, challenging, you know, uh, definitely harder than I thought it would ever be. But I think there's a lot of satisfaction in being able to see what you've created.
Right. Well, when you see outcomes, instead of expecting outcomes or having expectations about outcomes and just allowing them, and then you watch,
Right.
it's like, because I've been working as a transformational coach for the last, I don't know, 7 to 10 years, something like that. And it's like you're birthing a baby, you know,
Mhm.
it's when you see and it's not even a final result. It's just as you watch it happen, as you watch the child grow, it's like, oh, look, you know, I mean, all these things happen and people are growing and people like for me, who I recognize were in such a low, dark space, and then they're doing their work and they're smiling now. I mean, that's my story. So that's why I think why I get excited when I hear other people's or watch other people grow through their stories too. You know, I think that's just really important. And I wanted to touch on something you said, anxiety. This is my little teaching moment. So what when you said anxiety, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were talking about as far as like you were having anxiety about getting it started, or is
Oh
that
no, this was just before, even before the network. I just remember I was seeing a therapist because at the time I had just done this major life move. I moved from Florida to California, away from all my family and friends, to where I knew like one person. My
okay?
father was in the throes of Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
I was in a very precarious job position before we all got blown out of our radio jobs. So there was a lot of anxiety. I wasn't sleeping. So I went to see a therapist, and I was talking to her about it, and I'm like, oh, I don't understand. Like I've always thought, oh, I'm in control. I'm in control of all of this. Why can't I sleep? Why am I feeling this anxiety? And she's like, are you listening to what you're telling me? You're dealing with the death of a family member, and if anyone's had Alzheimer's in their life, say no more. It's a horrific experience for
Hmm.
your family, everybody.
Yeah.
You're losing a job, which is horrible. You just moved away from all your support, and you're wondering why you feel anxiety. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can come through those things.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the reason I asked was because there's two ways I work with people with anxiety who want to, I want to see them get through the anxiety. And so, but there's two versions of it. There's what you were describing, and then there's the version where anxiety also has the same energy as excitement. But we're not going to talk about that one. We're going to talk for a second about the one you're talking about, because for those of you in the audience, anxiety tends to also stem from grief, unexpressed grief, or expressing grief in the process of it, because it can create this, because you don't know what's happening in the moment, you know, and it's important that it's a good thing that your therapist was talking to you about this or explaining it and everything. But the grief is just, that's important to be able to release the grief, because the grief is an energy that gets stuck within you. And when you don't release the grief, it will cause anxiety. Or if you are releasing the grief, and even in the process of releasing grief, it causes anxiety because most of us don't even know what's going on, you know? So I just wanted to kind of share that to give an idea of what that looks like as opposed to the excitement part of it, because obviously that wasn't it. But I just wanted to throw that
Right.
in here too. But yeah, that's the difference. So how can we, or let me rephrase that. What can we do to make sure that your platform can get out to the world, especially with all the things that are going on right now and people are, you know, in a bit of anxiety, you know, and use the information that you have on there with all the amazing podcasts you have there, by the way, including mine,
Yes.
to the world and just share it. I mean, I'm doing my darndest to get poke it out there, you know, but I want to get that thing. I think it's important that people are seeing these podcasts.
No,
So,
that's definitely our goal. I mean, we have kind of drilled it down to like podcasts that help people,
mhm.
podcasts that make you feel good. And that's what we're looking for as an antidote to what we're seeing on the news, the daily barrage of anxiety-ridden information that we're all dealing with, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on. Everybody's feeling it globally. There's conflicts around the world. So all of that is stuff that's kind of out of our direct control, right? We can't do anything about that, but how we are able to manage it ourselves. So I think just with our podcasters, like we encourage people to guest on each other's shows, like and share, tell a friend. We just have some amazing talent and more people that we're talking to. We work with new podcasters as well as people that are a little more experienced or established. And we're always looking for new teachers because we feel that there's such a need for people to find something that's going to resonate with them. And that's one thing that Louise Hay would always say, that she'd say, look at all of the authors we have. They're all so wonderful. A lot of them are basically saying the same thing, right? There's nothing new under the sun,
Mm-mm.
but it's how a certain author or someone will touch you and you respond to that and you're open to it. Some people really loved Dr. Wayne Dyer and they really resonated with his teachings. Other people really loved angels. Or if you find it really healing to work with a medium,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
receive a message that can help you handle grief. Like we want to be able to provide some of these different ideas to people so it will help them. So if you know someone who's hurting that might benefit from hearing from like our mental health podcast or some of the information you have to share, or maybe they're curious about mediumship and spirituality and spiritualism, that kind of thing. And they're afraid to tell their friends, or oh,
Sure.
my family's going to think I'm a nutbag
Yeah.
if I
Yeah.
start, listening to medium podcasts. But I think, we're just trying to kind of uh, rise the tide for all the boats kind of thing,
Yeah.
for all of our podcasters that are contributing. And we know it's a niche. I mean, we'll probably never be Joe Rogan size, and that's okay. I think there's enough people that,
Or we might. I mean,
yeah,
10%
or we
of
might,
the population, 10% of the population is pretty big. I'm just saying, right?
yeah, the
Yeah,
numbers could be there.
it
And
could.
another poll that I read recently that was surprising was how many people, I think it was 70% or something, believe in angels or
Hmm.
that you can connect with an angel. I wouldn't have thought it was that high of a percentage because sometimes I'm still doubtful. I'd like to see one if there's
Right?
one out there. I would love to see it, but I think maybe it's if they're there, maybe they've supported me in other ways that I could look back and say, oh, well, maybe that's why I met that person, or you know, when I got that flat tire and that stranger helped me, those people can be angels too. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're
Well,
just trying to grow and continue to spread the message, and hopefully we're presenting programming that does help people, because that's really the core of what we want to do.
yeah, and I think, I mean, well, because I'm one of them. I may be biased, but that's okay. But there's some really really cool, powerful shows on there. I mean, they actually have a animal communicator. She didn't mention that piece
Oh
of it.
yes.
That's really neat. But there's just such a variety of different things that are on there because there's such an interest in the alternative. There's an interest in, I guess the best word I can come up with is the woo woo, but whatever, but what I think is really cool about mindbodyspirit.fm is it's not just the woo woo, it's also grounded. It's also balanced. It's powerful. It's just got, and they can, and I love the idea of being able to connect podcaster to podcaster, interviewing that way and expanding. Like this podcast, my intention is as a doorway. It's a place where community and connection can build. And what better way to do that than bringing authors and whatever, or animal community, whatever. I mean, I've had mediums on here. I've had astrologers on here. I've had IT people on here, so we're all human. We want to expand and connect people together who are like-minded. And what better place to do that, than actually have a platform that can bring all of that together. And I think that's so powerful. And I'm grateful that you're there, obviously, but it's just, yeah, I think that's wonderful. And now your journey has always been about spirituality and metaphysics. Why has that been a lifelong interest? I think you touched on it a little bit when we first started talking, but can you go a little bit deeper into that piece of it?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think just having I mean, everybody has like kind of unexplained experiences,
Mm-hmm.
that you may not share, or as a kid you find
Yes.
frightening, so you don't really talk about it. So, there were some, different experiences that I had that I kind of questioned. And even even in the, like growing up in the Catholic faith, going to CCD, like I thought the nuns had magical powers. They seemed kind of otherworldly. And I remember asking one about, there was a prayer that I think it's called the Nicene Creed, or the Apostles' Creed. We believe in one, and we believe in one Father, or something something, in all that is seen and unseen. Like there was this one line in that particular prayer that says, "In all that is seen and unseen," and that always stuck in my head. Like even they're recognizing
Yeah.
that there are things that we don't see, there are things that we don't explain. I mean, and I'm a big believer in science too. Like I love all of that. I think we evolved. I don't necessarily believe in a literal interpretation of things. Like, was there a Garden of Eden? Well, a
Well,
snake and an apple? I don't know. Maybe those were stories or that were told to make things understandable to people at that time. But is there a loving energy or presence available to all of us? Yeah, I think there is that. So
mhm.
it's funny, like as I'm getting older and moving through life, your ideas and beliefs, you're open to things, sometimes they can change. So
Well,
I'm
just,
always
yeah.
open to that.
Yeah, and just thank you for saying that way, because even in our time at this point in the world, like go back to the 80s, go back to the early 2000s. I mean, things were just starting to come in. But there's like now, I mean, I didn't even mention this, but I've had a couple of people who've had near death experiences on here. So these are things that give you permission, basically, to find people who will get you, will understand you, because you're not the only one who's gone through this stuff. It doesn't matter what you've been through. Like being clairsentient, being able to feel things. Like I'm a highly sensitive and an empath. So I can feel things all the time. For goodness sake, I'm feeling all kinds of stuff going on in the world right now. And I do my best to clear that out. But years ago, I thought something was wrong with my body. I was like, why am I getting these weird sensations in my body? And I could never explain it. And I certainly couldn't talk to anybody I knew back then about it, because I wasn't around people who didn't understand that. And the very idea of spirituality and metaphysics today gives us that opportunity to connect with people who have experienced that through the podcast, through the books that come out, through whatever. And it just brings us closer and closer together when we feel like we've had a similar experience with somebody, and then we can shift through that understanding into, again, not to not to keep push, but that's true. It's my, what do you call it, my byline, to uncovering the truth of who we are. That's who we are, so why not just, okay, here I am, and oh, by the way, well, here I am. Why don't we come together and start to understand what's going on here? And I think that's like really powerful. So yay.
It can be, yeah. I think it is, and I think we need that understanding more and more to realize, when we look around the world and see what's happening, to realize that we all are human beings, and I think we all just want the same things, right? Don't we all want to be happy and be peaceful and have an abundant life and take care of our families and all of that? I mean, so why is there so much strife and division if
Mm-hmm.
we all want the same things? I think coming back to the core of who we are, your show, awakening to our own divinity. We are all, you know, creatures of God, I guess, pieces of that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep. Yeah.
pieces of the stars of the universe, of all of that.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned, in fact, by the way, the what we're made of as human beings mimic the stars and the earth. Not a lot of people, I mean, probably more people know that now, but that's true. We're each. It's almost like I've described this before, and I've heard it many times. Where it's one of those what are those old fashioned balls called, the with the mirrors on it, the
The
dance
disco ball.
disco ball. Yeah. So the ball is spirit or universe or God or whatever you want to call that, and we are all the little pieces of the little mirrors on there, and then the reflection, we reflect off each other, you know? So I think that's a powerful thing. Um, okay, so here's my favorite question. I was looking forward to asking you because you've worked with a lot of legendary spiritual leaders. And I'd love for you to share with us a powerful experience you had with whoever you choose.
Okay. Oh, let me think. I mean, there were so many, you know, amazing moments just like sitting and listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer, because every Monday was my favorite day because that I would be kind of his second banana, co-host. And in the beginning, when we started doing his show, we had, topics and a lot of things pulled from his books. And he finally said, I don't want to do that. He goes, I'm just going to talk to whoever calls in. And his lines were always jammed and he would talk to people. So there was some really beautiful exchanges there that I remember. Particularly one call that was interesting. It turned out to be Anita Morjani calling from Hong Kong.
Hmm.
She's an author now and out, speaking. Many people have read her book, Dying to Be Me, about her incredible near-death
Hmm.
experience. But at the time, she was just someone in Hong Kong who had written a blog and wanted to talk to Wayne. And so I remember making that connection and I looked at the call screen. I'm like, oh, here's a call from Hong Kong. Because I would always get excited if it was someone from, Norway or whatever. I'm like, this is so great because I love the idea of like the world being a little smaller
Yeah.
during that hour on a Monday, whatever time it was, wherever they were, we were somehow connecting.
Yeah.
So Anita being on the other end was pretty cool. So that was fun. And there was just all kinds of, amazing Denise Lynn. I mean, just such a beautiful soul and teacher, uh, working with her on her show. But one really interesting reading that I could share was with John Holland. And this was even after I had left Hay House. I was at Unity at the time, and he was my guest on my show. And I had a woman call in, and she got a reading with John that was just so incredible. It made like every hair stand up on the back of my neck. Long story short, I knew this person. I told her to call in, and the day before I had visited her, and there was a little picture on her desk of her son that had died in a motorcycle accident. I'm like, who's that? She's like, oh, it's Luke. He was in this horrible tragic accident. It was a total surprise. Well, John, in the reading the next day, totally got his name keyed in. He said, Mom, it was an accident. It was nobody's fault. It just happened. Everything's beautiful here. And then he mentioned the little picture. John said, he wants you to know he loves that little picture in the frame on your desk. How the hell did he know that? John
Hmm.
was in New Hampshire. This woman was in California. And I, at the time, was in Kansas City broadcasting the show. And I just thought, okay, I can't explain that.
Yeah.
I can't explain it.
Yeah.
I saw the picture on the desk. I knew what he was talking about. She was like, what?
Yeah.
So it was just and just the energy like in the studio when he was doing the reading with her, I thought he connected somehow. He connected to get this information. He knew his name, he knew it was an accident. He didn't specifically say a motorcycle wreck, but he knew it was some kind of, something fast that was
Hmm.
unexpected. So it was just amazing to me that this information can be accessed somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's a medium. I don't know if I've ever heard of him. He's a medium.
Yeah, he's a medium. He's based in New England. He lives in
Okay.
New Hampshire. He's written a couple of books. Um, I don't know if he's been on TV. I know people think of John Edward as the guy that had the TV show.
Yeah.
But John Holland, that reading he gave that day was really incredible. I don't know how he was able to key into that kind of exact information. Evidential, he
Mhm.
was an
Yeah.
evidential medium. So
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that's interesting that you bring that up because that's some powerful work. I actually hired an evidential medium just to kind of guide me through and see, okay, let's see who we connect with or whatever. And we went through it, and there was there was a lot of validation, and she connected me. Apparently, I wasn't supposed to be connected in that moment to anyone in my family, but some guy came through that I remember had someone else had brought him through like 10 years ago or whatever. And it was the same description and everything. And it was just like, keep going, you know what you're doing, all this kind of stuff. And it was very helpful. It was a very helpful reading. And I brought her onto the show to have a conversation with her about same thing, going through these questions and everything. And then at one point, I wanted to see what would happen about her, and we were talking about or what she could pull. And I was talking to her about my dad. I was asking her about why she wasn't pulling anybody from my past or whatever. And she was like, well, because you really didn't need that in the moment. And when I asked her about my dad, he shows up on this conversation on screen while we're in it. And she's telling me all these things that my dad wanted to tell me that he couldn't tell me when he was alive, because it wasn't in his, I guess, way of being able to communicate with me, because he didn't know how. And so it was such a powerful reading. I mean, she's like, I see him patting you on the head. And I'm like, he always used to me, pat me on the head, and he'd call me baby. And she would say all this stuff about that. And everything that she said was like right on point. And it just blows my mind how that works. And I've even have had experiences with, that's not the direction I choose to go in. And I think we're all capable of doing it. But my experiences have been like, I'm talking to somebody about somebody that they know that has died recently or died within the last couple of years or whatever. And I would start getting this this energy chill, whatever, just right here and up on my shoulders or what, and nowhere else. And that's it. And then I'd be like, well, I'm hearing something. Can I share it with you? And usually it was just, I remember the first time that ever happened, I was in one of those, what do you call those? Like, one of those events that everybody comes and they're all doing readings and all that.
Or like a psychic fair.
Yeah, kind of like that. And I'm not the psychic, I'm not the medium, but I was just happened to be talking to this woman, and she had mentioned about her husband that had died like a couple of weeks prior, or a couple of years, I don't know, something like that. And she wasn't able to let go of anything, and she's still holding on, and she didn't know what to do and all this stuff. I got that happen. And I heard him say, just let her know that it's okay. She can move forward with her life, and it's okay to do that. And I was like, okay. And so I told her that, and you could see she just took this deep breath and let it go. And she was like, oh my God, thank you for sharing that with me. And I was like, okay, because I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, that's my experience with that kind of thing. If I'm the one doing it, I don't know what I'm doing. It just happens, so, but it's definitely very powerful. And I think that people, when they have that happen, it sticks. It just stays with you for the rest of your life, basically. Yeah.
It does. I'll always remember that reading. And I think it can be very healing, if you get the right person. I mean, can there be some scammy people out there? Sure. Do your research, get recommendations if you are, curious to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think if it can heal, if it can help, then it's worth exploring.
Absolutely. Yep. So I have one more person I want to ask you about, because I got to meet him in person, and he was this was like 18 years ago. I can't even remember. Gregg Braden. What was he like in person?
He's great. It's super smart.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah.
He liked working with the guys, the engineers that we had at Hay House, and we made a blooper reel of different authors. We would record them. And Gregg said something like really funny one day, like, it's better to burn out than fade away, or something. Def Leppard. And so we saved it as a blooper, and he thought that was funny. So he has a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
Just really interesting guy.
Yeah.
Super smart.
That's what,
Yeah, I
yeah,
always enjoyed working with Gregg.
yeah, I got that. I got that too. But he's really kind because we were
He
sitting at
has
this
great
thing.
hair too.
Oh, yeah. He was
He
with
always had good hair.
he always does. And it always, how does he do that? I mean, he can't possibly put that much hairspray in to be able to get it to stand up. No, he must have, it must be thick. I don't know what's going
Yeah,
on.
he's got a nice
Yeah,
thick
I
head of
love that.
hair, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And he was with Joe Dispenza and somebody else. I can't remember who it was, but we were at some kind of event and I think it was in Pittsburgh. And it was way before anybody started showing up. And I was just sitting there with a couple of people. And he walks right up in front and starts talking to somebody behind me. And he looks right at me and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he reaches out, he's introducing himself. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, so yeah, I got that from him. He's just really, he's a kind, he seems to be a really kind person.
Yes. No, he
So
was. He was great to work with. I loved working with him on God, he did a couple books when I was at Hay House, Fractal Time.
mhm.
Um, gosh, I can't remember, two or three others. He's busy. I mean, every time I look on his website, he's traveling.
Yeah,
He's doing, hosting trips and events.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he's out there.
Yeah, and he's written a ton of books. I don't even know how many
Mhm.
books he's written. I've read a couple of, or written. I've read a couple of them, but it's been a while. So awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions that I normally ask people who I interview, but I don't give them a heads up. How do you see
Okay.
individual healing work contributing to the larger societal transformation?
Individual healing work.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that, healers that can step up and help people and contribute to us moving forward, I think it's going to be very important. I think healthcare is also starting to change where, doctors and healthcare systems are a little more aware of Reiki. They're a little more open to acupuncture. They call it, complementary medicine, and being able to access those things like, like I said earlier, if a mediumship reading can help you with your grief and your anxiety, I think being able to being open and incorporating those kinds of things is definitely going to move us forward in the future. So I hope we see more
Mhm.
of that in
Yeah,
healing.
yeah.
Absolutely.
For them to even just be aware of it is like a huge step in the right direction because you can't just discount the mind body connection, period.
Hmm.
Just
No,
saying,
absolutely.
just saying. How would you define awakening?
Awakening. I guess it can look different to many people. I think maybe when you're open to a different point of view, that you're able to see things from the other perspective, without the the glare of, prejudgment, misinformation,
Mhm.
uh, hate, prejudice, and those things, and maybe just being able to see people as people. So I guess awakening would be, hopefully, what we're moving towards, in the future right now after some dark times, and maybe we can awaken in enough time to save ourselves,
Yeah, that'd be nice.
before it's too late,
Let's not even, yeah.
But I think also, and this might be a weird, I don't know how this will land with people, but I think that people coming in now, the younger generation, there's less judgment and stigma on sexuality, on gender. I think there needs to be less hate and judgment on trans people. I actually think that a lot of those people are kind of, I think in the future, if we could look ahead 50 to 100 years, I don't think any of that's going to matter.
Mhm.
I think I think people maybe will be genderless, or
I thought
a
about that.
third gender,
I
or
thought about that.
you know what I mean?
Hmm, hmm.
Or there'll be more choices. I don't know. But I don't think that, I think it's just fear and misunderstanding that's causing all this hatred right now.
Hmm.
But I think we need to look at that. There's more young people that are identifying as not one or the other. That's
Yeah.
it. That's interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. I've read a lot of different things. Like one of the things about younger people is as they're coming in, and it's not just the younger 20 somethings or the teenagers or whatever, it's also the babies. They are so much more aware than we are. They know what's going on and they're coming into, they're like, what the heck is this crap going on, that type of thing. They're like, I don't want to deal with this, so they're kind of struggling because it's not probably thinking the same thing we do. What the heck did I sign up for? I don't know what this is. And so there is an awareness. And I have also heard that. I've heard that a lot of the generations coming in more now than before are shifting. I mean, I don't know. The gender thing is shifting. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it looks like. I do know that I had a neighbor when I was growing up in Virginia. I was, I don't know, between the ages of 5 and 10, whatever. And this little boy baby was born next door. It was our next door neighbor. And he was born both male and female. He had female parts inside and he had male parts outside. And they were giving him, he was having surgeries literally to, I don't remember what he ended up, I think he ended up being a boy, but it was like partial female parts, I mean, and that's still God's work and that's okay. That's the thing. It's like, why would you condemn something like that without knowing what it is or what it means or questioning or asking or just wanting to know that something happens for a reason, whatever that is, I guess, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
yeah, I really can see that. I don't know what that is right now, but it probably, now that you brought it up, it'll probably show up in my realm somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know how it will, if I could fast forward, I don't know if I'll be here on the planet.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to see if I could, teleport myself 50 years in the future in another 2 generations or so, what that will be. But I think there's something happening there and
Yeah.
we should explore it rather than, try to eradicate or
Yeah.
stamp it out,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of similar to autism because autistic kids, especially the nonverbal ones, are telepathic.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done
I'm a big fan of the telepathy tapes.
telepathy tapes. Okay. Yeah. And that's, I don't know. I mean, and I've been, even, I don't know about you, but I've had experiences of telepathy with people, especially when you're really, really close to somebody and you really, really know them. There's this thing going on, so it exists, whether people want to admit it or not. But the challenge with autistic children or neurodivergent people or whatever is that here's the societal version. They don't fit into society, so we need to figure out how to get them to fit in. Where that's not what's going on. Maybe they're here to teach us something and we need to learn how to understand why they're here. I don't know.
Right.
Just a thought. Right.
Yes.
So,
No, I agree. A little more understanding and inclusion, rather than, totally trying to shut things down
right.
and not learn what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it bears a lot more study and inquiry, but I think people need to embrace their critical thinking, and not listen to
Yeah.
all of the misinformation or, people trying to push their point of view. Like don't get your medical advice from me, who's not a podcast, who's not a doctor. I'm just someone on a podcast. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Well, that's why when I talk or talk with people who have more knowledge about a certain thing, this is just as much an educational experience for me as it is
Yes.
for people who are watching sometimes, because I don't know everything and I'll never claim to know everything. I think it's important for us to be open to learning new things or discovering new things or discovering and understanding things. I mean, that's my take. All right.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. What do you believe soul divinity is?
Soul divinity, I think, is kind of a natural state, right? I think aren't we all divine souls? Like Pierre Teilhard Chardin, D. Chardin. I always get his name wrong.
I think
He
I know.
says, yeah, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that part of us is divine. That is the piece of the disco ball that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So that's what I think that is. And that's why the title of your show is so great, because we're we're awakening that. I think we forget everyday life gets in the way. We're stressed, we're dealing with everything, families. So to recognize that, or at least glimpses of it, is a good thing.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. All right. How can people get in touch with you and find out more about mindbodyspirit.fm?
We'll definitely go to the website, mindbodyspirit.fm, and you can see all of our podcasters there. You can listen to everybody right on the website if you choose. We're also available on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, iHeart, you name it, we're out there. We also have a free mobile app, depending on, what kind of phone you have. I mean, most people with an iPhone will just listen on the podcast app. So that's really the best place. If you're interested in maybe launching a podcast in the spiritual space, you could reach out to us, info@mindbodyspirit.fm, and we could send you some information. We're always talking to podcasters, newbies that want to start. So we love to talk to new teachers too. But definitely, that's the best place. My podcast is called Be Present, the Diane Ray Show. I'm out there. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and also mindbodyspirit.fm on social.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Something you really want everyone to know from your experience, from anything, whatever.
Oh, let me think. Okay, a parting word. I think that there's support and help out there. If you need it, you can ask for it. And maybe just for a few minutes today, if you can just sit and think, maybe it's all going to be okay. It's just all going to be okay. And even if you don't believe it, just believe it for a minute or two. And then maybe the day will go a little bit better. But I think we're all going to be okay
I can,
ultimately.
yeah, yeah,
So let's all just hang in there together and try to be a little kinder and
yeah. Thank you.
work on it. I'll work on it too. I
Yeah.
need to do it
We
too.
all
I
need
need
to do
to
that.
work.
That's right. That's right. And when you say that, when I'm okay, do it over and over and over and over again, because we think 80,000 thoughts a day, and no, I don't even know how many thoughts
A
a day.
lot.
Most of those thoughts are negative. So if you can start to get into the habit of thinking those positive thoughts, you'll start attracting things differently into your life. We attract either way we go. So there's that. So
Very
anyway,
true.
all right. All
And thank
right.
you, Carolyn.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here, Diane. And thank you to everyone in the audience for being here on Awakening Soul Divinity. And we'll see you next time.